Okay, let's get right into it. We're going to break down the thinking of a legit product legend, Stuart Butterfield. You know, the guy who founded both Flickr and Slack. What we're going to do is unpack the core mental models he used to build products that people don't just, use, they actually love them.
So get this quote right here. He said this in 2014. That's the year Slack launched. I mean, wow. It's kind of shocking, right? But this perfectly captures his whole philosophy. It's this idea of, never being satisfied. For Butterfield, if you looked at your own product and couldn't see a million things wrong with it, a ton of ways to make it better, you had no business designing it in the first place.
So what's the secret sauce here? How does this mindset actually work in practice? We're going to break down the key principles from his playbook, and it all starts with the number one goal for any product he ever built. Okay, principle number one, the goal. And it's simple. The only thing that matters is creating value. At Slack, Butterfield had this one mantra, and he literally made everyone in the company repeat it out loud, like a chant, during their all-hands meetings, all to get them focused on one single North Star. And here it is. In the long run, the measure of our success will be the amount of value that we create for customers. See, for him, there was just no substitute for genuinely making your customer's life better. You can talk about value, you can market your value, you can shout it from the rooftops, but all of that is secondary. It's all noise if you aren't actually creating it. All right, so that's the goal. Principle number two is the method. How do you do it? He called it tilt your umbrella. And this all comes from a really simple story, something he noticed on a rainy day walking around Vancouver. So picture this. He's walking down a narrow sidewalk, it starts to rain, and everyone pops open their umbrellas. And he starts noticing something. As people walked toward him, most of them wouldn't move their umbrella at all. The pointy metal bits are aimed right at his face, at eye level. And he's the one who has to duck or step off the curb into a puddle. And he's thinking, okay, what's going on here? He figures there are only three possibilities. One, these people are just malicious, right? They want to poke him in the eye. Two, they're totally clueless. They just don't know basic sidewalk etiquette. Or three, and this is the one he landed on, they were just completely oblivious. They had no idea the impact they were having on other people. And right there, in that little moment of inconsideration, he saw a huge opportunity. And that's how tilting your umbrella became this perfect metaphor inside his companies. It's all about proactive empathy. It's about craft. It's that small act of courtesy that shows you're thinking about the other person. And this idea, this simple metaphor, translates directly into the software features that people end up loving. This is where the magic happens. So what does this actually look like in software? Well, think about magic links. Instead of making you type some crazy complex password on your tiny phone keyboard, they just email you a link. Boom, you're in. That's tilting the umbrella. Or how about Slack, noticing your notifications are going crazy and gently asking, hey, want to switch to a smarter setting? My personal favorite, though, is the shouty rooster. You go to type @everyone, and this little warning pops up saying, whoa, hold on, you're about to ping 147 people across 8 time zones. You sure? These little, tiny, considerate details, that's what builds an emotional connection. That's what drives growth. Okay, so we have the goal, which is value, and we have the method, which is empathy, tilting your umbrella. Now, principle 3, the enemy. Butterfield identified a very specific enemy, something that most product teams just get totally wrong. It comes down to a basic misunderstanding of what users are really struggling with. He argued that the entire tech industry is obsessed with the wrong thing. We're all running around talking about reducing friction, which usually just means how can we make it take fewer clicks? But he said that's misguided. The real problem isn't friction, it's comprehension. People just don't get it. They don't understand what the product is for or what they're supposed to do next. So he replaced that whole reduce friction idea with a new mantra, don't make me think. Because here's the deal. Making your users think has 2 huge costs. First, there's a literal physical cost. Your brain is burning glucose every time it has to make a tough decision. It's tiring. But second, and maybe even more important, there's an emotional cost. And it's this. If your software asks me to make a decision I don't understand, you're not just confusing me, you're making me feel stupid. And guess what? People don't forget that feeling. They will forever associate that feeling of being dumb with your product. That's why confusing design is so incredibly damaging. It's not just about inefficiency, it's like an emotional anchor that just drags your entire brand straight to the bottom. This brings us to an internal problem. Principle 4 is about the trap. A trap that can sabotage even the smartest, most well-intentioned teams out there.
It's the trap of doing work that feels super productive, but actually creates zero value. You've probably heard of Parkinson's law. Work expands to fill the time available for its completion. Well, Butterfield saw this play out constantly. As organizations get bigger, people invent more work just to look busy and justify their jobs. And this leads to something he gave a brilliant, hilarious name to: hyper-realistic work-like activities.
So what is that? It's all the stuff that looks and feels exactly like real work. You're in a meeting, someone's presenting a deck, everyone's nodding and talking, but it's all fake. It's just theater. Nothing of actual substance for the customer is being created. Let me give you a painful but perfect real-world example of this from inside Slack. Check this out. A team spent thousands of person-hours doing this. They added code to the product, they ran a big A/B test, they pulled huge amounts of data, made a bunch of charts, and of course, held meeting after meeting to talk about the charts. And the grand result of all this work, they discovered that their change made message threads, wait for it, 0.03 messages longer on average. I mean, you can't make this up. The cost of doing that analysis was just astronomical, way, way higher than any value that tiny change could ever provide. It was a guaranteed loser from the start, a perfect textbook example of fake work.
So the big question is, why? Why do smart people fall into these traps of doing fake work? Well, it all comes down to the final principle: the blind spot. And this is a powerful cognitive bias that honestly affects every single founder, every product manager, every creator out there. He calls it the owner's delusion. And it's simple. It's the mistaken belief that because your product is the most important thing in the world to you, it must also be important to your users, that they'll put up with anything to use it. The classic example he gives is those old restaurant websites. Remember those? All you want is the address and the hours. But you go to the site and you have to sit through this slow-loading, artsy photo montage with some horrible music auto-playing in the background. Why? Because the owner thinks the restaurant isn't just a place to eat, it's an experience. They completely forget that you're just a normal person trying to figure out where to get dinner.
And that really is the final, most important takeaway. It's a question you have to ask yourself. You are the owner of your product, but are you deluded? If you want to build things people genuinely love, you have to fight that owner's delusion every single day. You've got to escape your own bubble, get out of your own head, and relentlessly, ruthlessly fight for the value, the empathy, and the simple comprehension that your users deserve. Because at the end of the day, they're just busy, normal people trying to get by.